Awesome. Welcome everyone to our September virtual University of Oxford Open Day. It's the Law Faculty. My name's Emma White. I'm the Admissions and Outreach Officer for the Law Faculty. And today we're going to focus mostly on the LNAT and a little bit on the interviews because that's the stage that we're at the moment in the admissions cycle. If you ask any questions on the university's website page, I'll be looking at that and I'll transmit them to our Zoom meeting that we're having now. So any questions that you have on there that you feel like haven't been answered or you want a bit more detail, just let us know on the website. With me today, we have two Lolas. We might have one more pop in as well. A Lola means Linklater Oxford Law Access Ambassadors. So they are all law students and they're specialised in helping us with our access and reaching out to students in our outreach programmes. And we also have Rebecca Williams, who's our law admissions coordinator. She's also a tutor at Pembroke, is that right? Awesome. So she's going to start off the chat with the academic side of the LNAT, and then we'll move on to our law ambassadors talking about their experiences, if they had any issues, and what advice they've got to give you. So if I hand it over to Rebecca, and I'll pop in with the chat every now and then.
Great, thanks, Emma. So hello everybody. If I explain then a little bit about why we have the LNAT and what the university thinks it's doing with the LNAT. The LNAT was invented because we want as much information about you when you apply as we can possibly get. So we get your school results, and we can also, you probably heard us talk about contextualizing those school results, so we can compare not just how do you perform kind of across the country, but how particularly do you perform against your own cohort in your school. So, although whatever your results were in the raw terms, was it still the best that school had ever seen? And, if that's the case, then we should hopefully know that. So we have those results, and we've always had those results, but we really wanted to get a little bit more information about people as well. And the other thing about law is that it's not something you typically study, certainly to GCSE level normally. Some people do it for A level, but even then the course is quite different from what you would find on a university course. So whereas if you're a maths tutor, you can probably look quite sensibly at GCSE maths results and what people have learned at school, and that will be relevant to you. There isn't that obvious a fit between school results and what we're looking for when you're coming to do and study law at Oxford. So the idea behind the LNAT was that it would be a test which lots of universities could use, so that it wasn't just something we were asking people to do especially for Oxford. And it tries to test what your kind of innate abilities are for the subject. So not necessarily stuff that you've been taught or stuff that you've learned at school or stuff that you've been trained to do, but actually just generally, how good are you at the sorts of skills that would make you a good lawyer? So as you know, there's two bits to the LNAT. The first bit is the multiple choice bit. And what that involves is reading things and thinking logically about them and then answering some multiple choice questions on the basis of that reading. And that's really important because one of the key things you're going to learn to do on the course when you're here is read huge amounts of information really quickly and digest it and make logical sense of it and understand how that information all fits together and then draw conclusions from it. So if we ask you to do a little bit of that in the form of a comprehension exercise in this test, it gives us an indication of, are you the sort of person who is likely to be able to do that business of reading and digesting and doing something sensible with the information that you've got that way in answering questions afterwards. So that's what the multiple choice bit is about. The other part of your course here is that you write huge numbers of essays, and your final exams and the exams that you sit during the course will all be based on things that you write in different ways. And so that's what the second half of the LNAT is for. It's to see how good you are at writing things. And it's really, again, very much less about what you write in the sense of, have you given the answer that the person reading your essay would have given? And very often the questions are the sorts of things that are a bit open-ended and don't necessarily have a right answer, but it's more about, can you express some intelligent things in a sensible order? Is it easy to follow the argument that you're making for the reader? Have you thought of some counter arguments to the argument that you're making? So maybe there's a really obvious point against what you're saying. Have you thought of that? Have you got an answer for it? Have you talked about that in the writing that you do? So it's really all those sorts of things, because again, one of the really, really important components of your course here is going to be that writing. Can you express yourself, that logic that we know that you have? Can you express that in a sort of articulate and intelligent fashion so that the reader can follow you and they can see the point that you're trying to make? So that's what the two halves of the LNAT are intended to do. And the idea really, as I say, is just for it to give another piece of data that we can use in selecting people, because the more data and the more information we have about each of you, the better we can make our selection process in relation to you. That is also the role that it plays. So when you apply to Oxford and we're thinking about who we might invite for interview, your school results to date, as I say, contextualised, very heavily contextualised, and your LNAT results are the key things that we're going to look at that stage to work out who we should shortlist for interview and who we shouldn't. And so that's the role that it plays at that stage. Then when we're making our final decisions, when we've interviewed all the people who came for interview and we've had a look at who's out there, then as we're making our final decisions, again, it plays a role in that, but not the only role. So again, we're going to look at school results to date. We're going to look at the predicted results. We're going to look at the LNAT. And then by that stage, we're also going to be able to add in how you did it interview. And so the ultimate decision is going to be made on all of those factors. And the decision to invite you for interview is going to be all of those factors minus, obviously, the interview score, which you won't have yet. So it does play a role in our admissions process, but it doesn't by any means play an absolutely exclusive role. And we look at it in the context of all of those other factors as well. So if I hand over then to Sahil and Imogen to talk a little bit more about their experiences with the LNAT.
So I'll go first. Hi, I'm Sahil. I'm about to go into my second year studying law at St. Catherine's College, CATS, and I'm just going to talk to you briefly about my tips for the LNAT as someone who's been through it, of course, a couple of years ago now. Some tips that I'm going to give, and I think that the broader theme of the advice that I'm going to give right now is going to be the fact that when it comes to a test like the LNAT, where it's an aptitude test, and as Dr. Williams just said, there's a lot of they take it into quite important consideration, but there's not as much, there's not so much you can practice specifically for that. But in terms of the broader theme that I'm going to talk about is that you have control over a test like this. There's certain things that are under your control, and that even though that the test is quite difficult, there's some things that you can apply every time, no matter how difficult the test is. So when we talk about, I'm going to, and this is going to go into quite more general things, right? So for example, like know where like you booked the test, make sure you can get there in good time, try and get a good night's sleep before, eat something in the morning, like you'd say for any test. For the multiple choice section, I feel like it's hard to give specific advice for the content of the section, because reality is that there might not be a lot of time for your test now, but the best thing you can do is to get exposure to that format and practice the questions and try and look some practice tests online, and like kind of understand, because once you do those kind of, if you practice tests, you kind of understand, okay, this is what the LNAT's demanding of me, and then it won't be like a shock to you when you come into the exam. And there's one important thing also that you have control over is timing. So personally, when it comes to LNAT, I believe there's 95 minutes in the multiple choice section to answer 42 questions. And I feel like I personally didn't like the whole idea of spending 2 minutes per question or something like that. What I preferred to do was, when I went in, I was like, okay, I'm going to reach question 21 by 40 minutes. Oh, sorry, question 21, yeah, by 40 minutes in, and then I try to stick to that timing, so that at the end I'll have like 10-15 minutes to check through at the end. Now that works for me, because I definitely feel like you should have an idea of how you're going to approach the timing of this exam, because the questions are always going to be difficult, but if you have control over the timing, that can make things a lot less stressful. You don't want to run out of time, and that's a good way to do it. You have that in your mind before you go in. That's something you can sort out before. And then when it comes to multiple choice, the rest of my advice is just going to be pragmatic stuff that you can apply to most multiple choice tests. You're going to get a whiteboard when you come into the the LNAT room. They might not give you a rubber. What I did was I divided my whiteboard in two, one half for the multiple choice, another half for the essay section. And for the multiple choice, I would write down the questions I found difficult, because you can flag them and come back to them at the end. So I'd flag the questions I find difficult, and then perhaps, because in multiple choice questions, there's always some answers that are just like ridiculous, right? You can cross them out straight away. But if you're unsure, then it might be between, A or B. You can write, question 2, A/B, A or B, and then at the end you come back to it and then make a decision, because at the end of the day, if you don't know, you just have to make a decision as best you can out of those two options. So kind of those pragmatic approach to the timing, and making sure you kind of narrow down your options in a multiple choice test is very important. And that like at a certain point, that's all you can do is some of the questions, because it's a difficult exam. There's only, the average mark is only a half mark. So that's the best way to, I think, approach the multiple choice exam. And with the essay, now I'm able to give more detailed advice about the essay section. I've marked on essays myself, practice essays, and essays that have been given to me. And I always say this, but the most important thing I can say to anyone that's going to write an essay is that the easiest thing to do is to make your point of view really clear, like throughout your essay. So what we don't like to, I don't think what people are marking LNAT essays, they don't want to see. They don't want to see this kind of like, there are good arguments on both sides, kind of, you might write this for A-level, but there are good arguments on both sides on one hand, on the other hand, and then the conclusion is, oh, they're both good, or like, I think this is slightly better. And at the very end, and what we want to get a good score in the application section of the marking, what we want to do is we want to make our point of view clear in the introduction and then like throughout the essay. So, but this sounds kind of difficult, but say if I always give this example as well. I say like, say if the example is, should there be compulsory voting in the UK? Now, like you can make your very first sentence, there should be compulsory voting in the UK, or there should not be compulsory voting in the UK. And then in the rest of the introduction, you can tell me, what arguments you're going to make and for. Like a good structure to use for the essay is kind of introduction, 2 paragraphs for your point of view, and then the one against, and then conclusion. And then throughout those paragraphs, at the end, you're always saying, therefore, there should be compulsory voting in the UK, or there should not be, blah, blah, blah. You're just restating your point of view at the end and in the conclusion. That way, when someone's marking your essay, they don't have to wait until your conclusion to find out what your point of view is. That's kind of really like, that's something they don't want to have to do in your essay. And that's made so much easier if you just say it at the beginning rather than just waiting until the very end, to say what your position is. So, and this is why planning is really important in the LNAT. So you have 40 minutes. You want to set aside some of that time for planning, 5-10 minutes, and about 5 minutes at the end to check. So that's what you need to do in practice. And the way to practice that is to kind of perhaps get like a word, get a past essay questions, get a Word document, disable spell check, and just practice writing that and planning that and making your point of view really clear. And I'll give one more tip. I've already talked about the structure, the application things. These are all things that you can apply to any LNAT essay. And this is something that will hold you in good stead also at university if you apply those kind of essay writing skills and making your point of view clear. But one more tip I would say is, I think reasoning is another section of the mark scheme that I think students find quite difficult to apply. And I think that even when I was revising for the LNAT, I was like, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to students. And I think that when it comes to critical analysis in the LNAT essays for a sixth form student, I think that the best thing to do is this, right? So it's also related to my point about making your point of view clear. When I talk about that third paragraph, that's how I would structure, right? If I talk, you can do it in any way, but if we're talking about raising counter arguments, you have your point of view on the question, there should not be compulsory voting. You want to provide some balance to your essay, but you want to do this in a critical way. So you want to bring up a counter argument, but you don't want to bring up a counter argument for the sake of just saying, on the one hand, on the other hand, they're both good. You want to bring up the counter argument to then dismantle that counter argument and then just say why your argument's better than that. That's simple. That's the best thing. That's the most consistent way to introduce critical analysis into your essay. Show that you're aware of the other side, but also show why you're aware that it's wrong. So, and that can also be quite difficult because sometimes, let's face it, the counter arguments are good. So the counter argument to the compulsory voting. So if I don't think there should be compulsory voting, I can say the counter argument should be, I feel like it would improve public engagement and participation in politics. That could be a counter argument like that. That's a reason why there should be compulsory voting. But a good way to get around a counter argument in this way that you can apply to most essays is to think about how can we satisfy this concern without having to deny my point of view. And what I mean by that is, for example, if you want increased public knowledge of politics, why don't you just fund kind of more PSHE lessons in schools for civic citizenship lessons? Why don't you fund kind of like content creators who are educating people about politics rather? So again, we can address this concern in different ways, and that's a good way to get rid of the counter argument. But the gist of it is and then that also strengthens your application section, because again, you're restating your point of view by bringing up a counter argument and then get rid of it. So those would be my tips for the LNAT, for the multiple choice and the essay section. But what I want to say is that you have control over a lot of these things. It's a difficult exam. It's definitely a difficult exam, but you can definitely prepare for it by having these kind of considerations in mind, strategies that you can apply to the exam no matter what the questions that come up. Some things are definitely under control, and I wish everyone the best of luck in that.
Okay, so I'll discuss my experience. I don't think mine's going to be as long as that because every point that Sahil made was really good. So I'm just kind of going to go through, first of all, how I approach the multiple choice, then the essays, and then kind of just some general tips. So I started practicing pretty early, so it was in summer, but I know a lot of people don't start practicing until, a month or two before. But I guess the thing that I took away from practicing was the LNAT is a headspace. The LNAT is like probably one of the hardest exams I've ever done. I did not have a good time with it to begin with. My marks were so bad when I started practicing. But they only got better really through practice. But also I was always like warned against over practicing, because then you start to get stressed and then, your marks drop. So once my marks began to pick up, so once my marks began to pick up, I kind of chilled out a bit on the practice test. I did one maybe every few days. And then, I really did reduce the amount of practice tests I did as it got nearer to the test, because I feel like that's a really good advice to take away, is that you need to get into the headspace for the LNAT, but sometimes you can overthink and do too many tests, and then you've got to kind of trust yourself. You're like, this is my process. So mine was, as kind of a lot of people do, is deduction. So it's like, does this answer really fit? And then it was like, no. And then you kind of get down to 2, maybe 3 answers. And then I guess for timing, this is really important as well, is that I split into sections. So I did say 8 minutes or whatever per section. And then if I looked at a question, was like, I really don't know the answer to this, I would flag it up, I would always make sure I left like 10 minutes at the end of the LNAT, the first section, to go back and with a fresh mind, because sometimes you can get really too kind of involved in the facts, because the LNAT is just application of facts. It's not, you have to basically exist in a vacuum for while you do your test. So for multiple choice questions, I would just say timing is really important, getting in the correct headspace, looking at this and saying, these are the only facts I know, not anything outside of it. Leave time to go back. And then in terms of essays, one actually really good tip is that you need to practice without autocorrect, because it's not like Microsoft Word when you get into the test center. It's like really basic kind of. There is actually a program, I think, that you can use where there's no autocorrect, and you have to get used to that. And then in terms of structure, I'd say think of 3 to 4 paragraphs, each acknowledging another argument. It has to be so clear. So I did my intro and conclusion last. Some people, prefer to get their argument out in their first paragraph. So then they kind of know where they're going with it, whereas I do it, and I still do it now, whereas I will think of my paragraphs and then I'll do an intro and conclusion, because I also think that helps with critical analysis, is that once you've kind of gone through your arguments, you can easily write an introduction and a conclusion that match the body of your essay. And also, it is only supposed to be a mini essay. They're not expecting you to write, 2,000 words. Not even really 1,000 words. It's got to be, just nice, clear, coherent line of argument. Acknowledge counter arguments, but critically evaluate them. Say, even though there is this counter argument, it's not going to affect my opinion because of this. So yeah, and then in general, my twin sister booked it quite later on, and I just booked it kind of as soon as possible, really, like really early October, so that I was like in the LNAT headspace and I wasn't back in college, because I feel like when you're back in college, then you get into the critical kind of, the essays that you write for college are so different from the ones that you write for your LNAT. So I say book it earlier, trust in yourself as well. Don't think like, oh no, I need to practice. Like once you're in that headspace and your marks are kind of where you want them to be, then take the test and just get it out of the way, because you're not going to get your results until February anyway. So you've kind of got to do it and then just not think about it, because it is only a small part of the admissions process. Even if I know people who did really well on the LNAT, and I know people who didn't do too well on the LNAT either. So it really is like a holistic approach to it. Also, a general tip as well is make sure that your college know that you're taking the LNAT, as in if you need to take time off college. So I had to like miss lessons because I was doing the LNAT that day. So just make sure, email your personal tutor and say and get them to sign it off, saying that I'm not going to be in that day. because I know a lot of people forgot to do that. I was actually really ill the day of my LNAT. I did an email, but there are mitigating circumstances forms that you can fill in for the LNAT. So, you know, and even if I was really ill, but I just did the test because I really got myself, I over panicked about the test, which was also another tip. Don't do that. It's just not gonna go well for you if you get like hyper stressed about it. Don't think about it after. Like once it's done, it's done. You can probably think about it for 5 minutes, and then you've got to be like interviews and everything else. I'm gonna move on after that. And yeah, mine went so much better than I thought it did. Actually, someone gave me the law tutor gave me advice and said, you know, the LNAT is, you can prepare for the LNAT, but it's also a bit of luck as well. And I think that was just the best advice I got. It was that the LNAT really is a really, really hard test. And sometimes it just doesn't go your way. I know people who were scoring way better than me who scored lower than they scored when they went and did the test, and I scored way higher than I had been scoring while I was doing the practice test. So it really does depend on what the test involves on that day. So I would just say, you know, that you can prepare for the LNAT, but also it is one part of a broader admissions process. So, you know, don't drive yourself insane by, you know, over stressing about the LNAT, because it's a holistic approach. There are mitigating circumstances if something does go wrong, if you're ill that day. So yeah, that's my kind of advice. Just best of luck, and you know, focus on, do the LNAT, don't think about it after it because you can't change it, and then focus on the interviews.
Hi, everyone. Sorry to join you a little bit late. I just would let you know that Emma is just having a few little technical difficulties right now. So, and I believe she will be trying to get that sorted out. So I don't know if anyone has any more input they would like to give on the LNAT or to answer the questions that we have coming up through Slido.
Yeah, I'll just have a look if there's any questions. I don't believe there's been any questions asked, but if anyone's watching wants to ask any questions, yeah, we're here to answer anything you want. So yeah, go for it.
So it might be worth saying some of the questions that we got quite a lot of this morning were asking about, you know, do we have a kind of cut-off threshold for the LNAT? Because I know some universities do, and they will say in advance, you know, we won't consider anybody. Or people sort of saying, you know, what is the minimum score that you'll look at for the LNAT for this coming year? We do on our website publish information about the scores for previous years, so we can see what we've done previously, but we don't kind of set in advance what the threshold is going to be, because it's really kind of a competitive thing, and it sort of depends how everybody else does. So what we'll do every year is sort of look at a graph of how everybody's performed, and then we can say, well, look, you know, if you're in that section of the graph, you've obviously done well on the LNAT, so that's where we're going to kind of focus our efforts. And retrospectively, we'll be able to say, oh, it turns out this year that the lowest mark somebody got on the LNAT and got into Oxford was X, but we'll only sort of know that retrospectively when we've done the whole admissions process, because like we said before, it's only one of the things that we look at alongside some other information. So we sort of have a distribution of who's done well on the LNAT, and we'll focus on that as far as the LNAT is concerned, but we'll look at that alongside a lot of other pieces of information in assessing whether you should come for interview and whether we should take you on the course ultimately. So yeah, we don't have a kind of advanced cut-off that we can tell you that, right, you know, if you've got below that.
I know there are a couple of questions. I always receive people who are interested in applying to Oxford and doing the LNAT. So I'm going to throw a couple of questions out there. I don't know if they've been answered, but I know some people are a little bit hesitant to put themselves out. So I'm going to do it for you guys, because we want you to really get the best experience overall. Now, a lot of the students ask me, how much does spelling and grammar count in the LNAT, since there's not a spell check function within it? They're very worried about how much that might completely destroy their essays. What would you say to that?
So I would say not to worry over much about it. I mean, we know in particular that there may be people who have disabilities that affect their ability to spell and this sort of thing. And if that's you and you come here, then there will be help with your spelling, and you will be given those sorts of software when you do your exams on the course here. So seeing what you could do without that software is not kind of relevant for anybody who has one of those disabilities. So I would say don't get too hung up. I can see the point that you might want to try out what it's like without it, just because that's going to feel unfamiliar to you. If you're used to a kind of autocorrect and suddenly there isn't one, that's going to feel unfamiliar. But actually don't worry over much about how you're spelling things and that kind of thing, because we're going to look much more at the content of what you've said and your overall argument and are you saying sensible things in a sensible kind of order. That's much more what we're going to look at than actually have you spelled every individual little word right. And we know you're doing it against a time pressure, so even if you don't have a particular disability, you haven't got all that much time to go back and correct stuff. So again, we're not really testing that. We're much more interested in how your brain works, and that's much less to do with your spelling.
I've got a question fed to me saying that a lot of people are wondering about the marking scheme for the LNAT. Is it available on the site? If you're happy to dive in with that, but I can just say, yeah, go to the site and take advantage of everything. There are lots of things available, lots of the marking schemes, sample tests, practice essays. So they're really good resources. And I'll pop in and say that you don't ever have to pay to do well on the LNAT. Yeah. Beware the hype. There's so many resources out there that you can use, which are free. I believe they have 2 multiple choice tests on the website, a couple of sample essay questions. And I always suggest trying out Oxford's Big I Days, because that's usually, I think, is a good one that give you a topic and then ask you how you think about it back and forth. But would you give any essay idea on the?
Yeah, I would totally reiterate that there are all manner of people who will try and sell you all manner of stuff to do with the LNAT, and you've just got to be very skeptical about it, because what they're interested in is making money. They're not interested in getting you into Oxford particularly. They're just interested in making money by exploiting kind of any concerns or nervousness you might have about doing the test. So be really, really wary of that. The idea behind that when it was first invented was that it would just look at people's raw intelligence, and that it would be something that it really wouldn't matter what your school background was. That was what it was originally designed to do. We do know that if you practice in the way that Imogen and Sahil have talked to you about, if you do that kind of practice, that does help. So from that point of view, there is something you could do to prepare for it a little bit. But absolutely, as Zoe says, it's only what everybody in the world can do, which is just go onto the free online stuff, look at the LNAT's own website and the resources that they point you to. And so, what you can do to prepare for it is exactly the same for everybody. And there isn't a kind of sense that you can be prepared for it by paying lots of money. That isn't something that we would recommend you try to do.
Now, I know that we don't have very many we don't really have any combinations with law with other stuff, but you can do law with a language at the university. And we have someone who's asking, what is the language aspect of the interview like? So if you wanted to do law, how do you secure a place for that, and law with French for as an example?
So Sahil or Imogen, are either of you on course 2?
No, but there's a few people at my college that are on course 2, and I think for interviews they did have some form of language speaking interview, but I don't think it was as long as the normal interviews. I'm not too sure. I can't. Yeah.
No, that's right. So the Language Centre will organise you an interview in the language that you, unless it's the Netherlands that you're applying for, then otherwise they will organise an interview for you in the language that the place that you want to go and study. So that will be something that the college that you apply to and get an interview with, they will arrange that with the Language Centre. So when you get your interview timetable for that college, you'll be told you've got the interviews there, but you've also got some interviews at Language Centre as well. And I think that's right. It's not as kind of general and in depth as the law interviews are, and it is much more focused on just are you able to speak the language to the relevant level. In terms of how admission to the 2 courses works generally, the decision to admit you to do law in general is for the college that's interviewing you, or the colleges individually. So you will probably find, if you apply for course 2, that you'll be asked at some point during an interview, are you happy to be considered for the plain 3-year law course as well? That's not a reflection on you. We ask that to every single course 2 person that we see, because the way it works is that you will be admitted for law, if you're admitted for that by the college, And then the college will put you forwards to the faculty and say, right, we're going to take these 6, in my case at Pembroke, 6 lawyers for law, but these 2 have applied for course 2. Will you add course 2 on for them at faculty level? And then the faculty selection committee for course 2 sits down and works out, of all the people who've been given a place in Oxford generally but want to do French law, which are the ones that are going to go on the French law course. And I, as the tutor in college, will then get a letter back from that committee saying, thank you very much, but we've decided we're going to give a place on course 2 to one of your 2 students, but not to the other one, or to both of them, or to neither of them, or whatever. And then we will write as a college to the students and say, congratulations, you've been given a place on course 1, or congratulations, you've been given a place on course 2 as appropriate. So the decision to admit you to do law in general is separate from the decision whether to add course 2 onto that on top. So you don't risk anything by applying for course 2. You're being considered for course 1 all the time as well. So it doesn't reduce your chances of coming to Oxford to do law in some format, but you might get course 2 as well, or you might not.
Okay, get ready. There seems to be becoming a little bit of a flurry. So I have another fun one filled for you. And this is one that I might ask you to break down a little bit for me as well, because I'm always interested in this. So we have a really good student here who's divided the admissions process, or simplified the admissions process, into 3 areas: the application, the LNAT, and the interview. And so they're asking, so they've given it a third, 33% for each, 33.33333%, we're very technical about it, to each component. And are they asking, is this correct? And if so, or is there one aspect that's considered more favorably than another?
So that is a really good question. And one of the things that we try to do with actually all our admissions across Oxford, but particularly because I'm responsible for that in law, is really look sensibly with the statistics at what are sensible choices for us to make. So, if we put more weight on the LNAT, does that make our processes more or less accurate? If we put more weight on other things, does that make our processes more or less accurate? So I can't give you a kind of exact formula of, it's kind of 2 scoops of LNAT and 1 scoop of BGCSE and this kind of thing. I can't exactly do that for you. I can tell you that it is a sort of holistic approach where we look at all of the different scores. And as I say, that's not just your raw school scores, so how many A's and A stars and whatever else did you get, but it's also very contextualized. It's like, how was that compared to your own school? And if you did the absolute best that your school has seen in that year, then even if your raw scores aren't all A's and A stars, that's fine. We still know that's an incredibly strong set of results from your particular school, and that will count as strongly with us as somebody who's got 100 A stars, but then so is everybody else at their school, and so they're in a different sort of position from you. So we look at those very contextualized school results, and they play a very big role as well. So to decide to select people for interview, it's those very contextualized school results plus the LNAT that we look at. And if you're particularly strong in one area, that can to some extent counteract weakness in one of the other areas as well. And then when we come to interview, we add the interview score in as well, and that's something else that we can consider. And again, somebody who perhaps was a little bit weaker on paper but has done an absolutely amazing set of interviews, we might well think, oh yes, we do want that person. We perhaps didn't think initially we would, but totally do now. We've seen them. And there may be other people who are very, very strong on paper, but perhaps didn't stand up quite as well in the interview process. So really, as I say, we do statistical analysis of what we've done, and we do work all the time on trying to ensure that we are using the right balance of those different scores at different stages during the process. But the best way to think about the process is that kind of, we try and look at the whole picture, and we try and look at all the different factors rather than being really rigid about it's this, and then it's this, and then it's this.
Okay, right. I'm peppering you guys with questions, so I apologize, but this is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to throw in some questions that come from my pathways as well, because I know they're knocking around in the background and they're quite interested. We did a really interesting survey, and it was a lot of students said that they were intimidated by the University of Oxford. So I would maybe toss this out first to our students, our lovely Lolas, because I think there's a balance between being awed and inspired and intimidated, and just what did you feel on your impression before coming to Oxford, and now as a student, do you still find it as intimidating, or is it just kind of like old hat now? It's just yeah, Harry Potter, we've moved on, fabulous beasts.
So for me, I think Oxford does have an intimidating kind of character to it. I definitely expected to get here because I'm from the north, so I didn't expect kind of to come here, and I kind of expected it to be, kind of posh London, private school educated kind of boys, and that was just completely wrong. Everyone, even like a lot of my friends went to private school, and every single one of them is so lovely. They don't like relate at all to the character that gets like perpetrated, you know, as being, you know, looking down on people. It's just not kind of what I experienced either. Everyone's just, I haven't met a person that I haven't liked here. And I know that like there are probably there's definitely the kind of private school boys here, but for me at my college, I've just never had a bad experience really with any of that. And I think that like the stereotypes that get pushed out, like and what Oxford looks like, are just not true. Everyone's just kind of here, you know, because they love the academic kind of side of it. They want to work hard. There's no kind of you know, but there's no kind of I haven't really seen too much of the stereotypical kind of like image of Oxford. So for me, yeah, it was definitely intimidating coming here. I thought that yeah, I thought that people would be like, oh, she's got a really strong northern accent. And it's just not yeah, it was just not kind of what yeah, I definitely had kind of the wrong idea about it. I remember when I first came here and for interviews, and I said to my dad, I was like, they don't like me, like, and he was like, Imogen, you've met them once. And then I went and actually properly spoke to them, and it was all really nice. So yeah, it's definitely intimidating, but there's no reason why you should think that, because everyone here is genuinely lovely.
Sahil, any input into the intimidating nature, the supposed intimidating nature of Oxford? Because, oh yes.
I wouldn't, to be honest, I would be lying if I said that I was like really, really intimidated by Oxford before I came. I think for me, it was more like, oh, you know, I will try my best. I'll see what happens. I definitely thought it would be difficult. I was surprised that, you know, I didn't find it as kind of the academic side of it. It's tough, but I think it was definitely easier to adjust than I thought it would be. In fact, I found it quite refreshing and freeing, because I'm someone that likes to organize my own time, and I found like kind of like studying independently, I really enjoyed that rather than being at school. And, you know, to be honest, I'm just gonna be really frank, I hated like waking up at like 8, 6, 7 in the morning. I hated getting on the bus to go to school, and I just liked that kind of freedom of arranging my own time. So in the sense of academic side, I didn't find it intimidating. I think my struggles when I came to Oxford were kind of more the general kind of university struggles. I hadn't lived away from home before. To be honest, like, you know, academic side is all great, but I was pretty useless at like doing kind of stuff to live by yourself, like cooking well, and that's the stuff I had to like sort out. And I think COVID also made it a bit difficult for us, because, you know, I had to isolate as well. For like, you know, I got COVID myself in my first term, had to isolate. So that wasn't, you know what I mean, those kind of things, but hopefully we're coming out of the woods on that. So yeah, I think that the thing about Oxford is, I think in terms of intimidating, I think there's demands, and I think that what makes Oxford a bit of a more difficult university experience than usual experience is that you have to be consistent over that 8-week term. A lot is demanded of you, in the sense that you're going to have to like produce essays on a weekly basis and meet those deadlines, whereas in other universities you might be left to your own devices more, in terms of, you know, more kind of spread out assignments, where like, you know what I mean. But whereas in Oxford you have to prepare the work for the tutorial, because otherwise, you know, you can't go to the tutorial and not do the work for it. So it's kind of the regularity of it. It's kind of more of a grind than other universities. I think that's what made it difficult, but also that's also what makes it, you know, the teaching great here. And I think that it's not intimidating in the sense that if you use the full resources that are available to you, if you you know, ask your professor lots of questions, kind of take their advice on board, you know, they're really there to help you. And, you know, at other universities, I don't think you'll be on like a first name basis with your professors. You won't be kind of they'll get to know you very well, which also means that if you're having any difficulties, you can be frank with them and talk to them about it. You're not going to feel kind of isolated as you might do in another university, because they're your first point of contact. So, you know, when I was, you know, I had some problems myself. If I was having any kind of troubles myself, I would say like, oh, sorry, could I please, have a day extension to do this essay? If you're polite and ask them good time of all these things, then everyone's willing to support you and make adjustments to that. So no, I don't think that the experience is intimidating in the academic side, because there's it's kind of lots of demands, but it's also they're very understanding at the same time. Also on the social side of it, I picked CATS, so I was kind of lucky to pick kind of a more modern college where there's more diversity. For me, that made me more comfortable. Like, just being frank, I think that made me more comfortable settling into that environment. And obviously there's lots of work to be done in this regard. Like, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that everything is it's not, but that's kind of a reflection of the work that needs to be done. But I would say that for people from ethnic minority backgrounds, it is not kind of, we are not like on the outside here, this is a thing of the past, to be honest. We have our own structures and our own communities within the university as such, where kind of like, for example, if I just give an example right now, I was providing someone that's coming to Oxford now, he's starting this year, with a lot of advice, another ethnic minority student, and he's kind of doing the Opportunity Oxford program. He was doing all those things, and now I see him at Oxford right now. I can see him right now. He's having a great time. He's going out. He goes to one of the colleges. He's going out with lots of friends. He made lots of friends that just like him. So he seems to be settling very well. And I think that if you make the effort to kind of join those communities, I think that that helps the transition a lot more.
I think that I'm really glad that you say that, actually, Sahil, because one of the things I would say is that from our point of view, we do want to be as diverse and representative a community as we can be, but we can only do that if people apply to us. So if you self-select yourself to not apply, we can't take you because we can't sort of come out and recruit you. But if you apply to us, then you have got as good a chance, at least, as anybody else of getting in. And so, that is what will help us to have as diverse a community. Because honestly, genuinely, the two things I look for as a tutor are, is this somebody who's got the innate ability to do well in law? Is this somebody who works really well? Like, can they motivate themselves when they're not particularly excited about the topic they're studying at that moment? Can they be organised? Can they focus themselves? Can they figure out that's what I need to do and this is what I need to do to get there? Are they kind of on top of their work in the way that Sahil was just describing? Those are the two things I look for. And honestly, I couldn't care less what package that comes in terms of all the other bits of people. It's lovely that it comes in all sorts of other, different contexts, and I get to meet lots of people. And I love things like Freshers Dinner, where I've got my, my new students who are coming in. So in a couple of weeks' time, and I'll sit down and have dinner with them, and they will literally be from all over the world. And I'll get to find out about them, and I'll get to find out about their backgrounds and, their families and their hobbies and all these kinds of things. And I love that that's all there. But it's not relevant to why I picked them, because why I picked them is on the basis of their brains and what I think they can do with their brains over the course of the 3 years. And I think every tutor that you come across will say the same thing. And so, the more people who apply to us, the more diverse those people are who apply to us, the more interesting and vibrant our community here is going to be. And, the smarter and better it's going to be. So really, I think that's the most important thing. And I also really, really want to echo this point about the individual attention that you get here, because I have taught in a red brick university where I had 90 students, and with the best will in the world, I couldn't know them in the same way as I can know my 6 students a year at Pembroke, who I teach in groups of 2 every single week. So there I was teaching a group of 5, maybe 3 times a term. Here I teach a group of 2 every single week, and I do that for all my students. And so I do get to know people really well. And it does mean, yes, that if somebody's got a problem, I can help them with it. If it's, it might be a kind of academic problem, I never seem to get above this mark in my essay, how can I improve? Or it might be, I've got a really difficult family issue at the moment, can I have a bit of time and flexibility to deal with that? Whatever it is, it means that I do know my students, and there is an incredibly strong support system for students here, because we can do that really individual care in a way that, as I say, with the best will in the world, you just can't do at a red brick university, however much you might want to. And that also means when it comes to my writing references for my students, I also know them really well. So, when an employer gets a reference from me, they know they're getting a reference from somebody who really knows that person and has really seen them develop over the course of the 3 years and has taught them themselves and has kept in touch with all of their other tutors and, seen them develop. And I can really write a really comprehensive reference. And that's really valuable to employers. And it's one of the reasons, among many others, that employers really like our students. So that's something else that's a really big benefit of the sort of small group system, and the fact that it is so personalised.
Sorry, could I just step in again? Is that all right?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, no.
So
this is great. I'm loving this. I was going to jump in with stuff. We all got this hotness going on. Let's keep this up. So what are you going to pop in there? Let's come on, bring it on.
I don't have much to say. I don't have too much to say, but I wanted to go in on that point again. I think Rika mentioned it, and it was about kind of, we can't change a uni if you don't apply. And I think that's the point. I think I want to hone in on that as well. I think I want to say that, we can't pretend that Oxford Uni is perfect, but what I want to say is that I think, yeah, definitely you shouldn't select yourself not to apply, because at the end of the day, it's not respectfully, it's not 1970 anymore. This uni is comprised, we are the university now. What I mean? We can't change the university from the outside. We can't, if you're sitting and thinking, Oxford has a diversity problems, it needs to improve in that regard. We can only do that by changing uni from within, and comprising that community, celebrating that community within Oxford itself. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I think that it's all well and good to sit back and complain and say, Oxford's not, it's not doing this, it's not doing that, but then we can't, it's not a really productive approach to kind of just revel in that and let it continue. And I think that's why I'm here. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing, and that's why I want lots of people, no matter where they come from, to apply to Oxford and kind of make this community change. And it is changing, and it is. And I would say that, definitely, I had, whatever problems you have at Oxford, I don't think that's not been a major problem for me. And I don't think it's a major problem. We want everyone to be as comfortable here as possible, and I think that's a reality now, and it's great, and we can continue to make that even better if people don't say to themselves that I'm not good enough to get in, people like me are not there, because that's simply a myth. That's all I can say about that. So yeah.
Okay, I just want to dive in quickly and piggyback on this, because this is something that I have a personal annoyance about, because I used to work for another university based in Oxford, and we could always see what would happen to Oxford. And what I want to say is, beware stereotypes. There are stereotypes out there about everything. And until you properly engage with those individuals, those organizations that you don't really know. Oxford is not alone with lots of organizations, institutions around the world. There are always going to be a few issues, but I can say from the law faculty especially, that this is something that we're being very proactive on working towards addressing, and making sure that that's not just addressed in the diversity of the students that are covered, it's also in the topics, the books, and the things that we're teaching. And they're doing a whole new looks at all of this stuff. So I encourage you to be here to help us progress to a better future. And even though it's a little bit cheesy, I love cheesy sayings. I'm going to toss in what Andrew Higgins says. He says that talent is not located in any one particular pool. And so we need to cast as wide as net as possible to ensure we're getting the best talent at the university. And that's what we're concerned about. So don't let other people's stereotypes about Oxford stop you from applying. If you like the teaching style, have a go. It's a nice place. Look at it. They hired me. It's a grand place. They're really nice, cool people. And I enjoy the faculty as a staff member. So I'll let the students chat a little bit more. Emma, are you back with us? Are you still having a little bit difficult?
I think I'm back, but it's coming out of a different device. So I'm so sorry about that, guys, but you did an awesome job.
What I'll do is I'll lead them on to the next question, and then I'll hush up a bit, and then hopefully everything would have sorted out. Now, we had some interesting questions about interviews. I'm once again going to combine two into one. Very simple. Will interviews be online this year? And is the interview more of a test on thought processes, how to get from point A to B, or is it a test of knowledge of the law? Well, I know interviews are online this year, so I can dance away with that. I'm pretty smart. And then hand over to Rebecca for her to tell you what they're trying to gain in the interview process, so that you guys can relax a bit about this, because a lot of you get a lot worked up. And one of the ambassadors yesterday said something that's really, the worst thing that you can do in your application is overthink. Go in and experience it and just answer what they're asking you. There are no hidden questions. Okay, enough of Zoe's jibber jabber. Once again, let me hand over to Rebecca so she can actually give you the insight into all of this.
Yeah, so I mean, that's absolutely right. In terms of what we're looking for in the interview, it really is very much, we kind of, I always say, we're trying to see inside people's brains. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to see how your brain works. So we are going to give you really difficult reasoning things to do. But you know, and I'm not surprised actually, Imogen, at all that you were saying before, you know, that you felt like it had all gone terribly. And we warn people about that at Pembroke. We say, look, you know, you will go out of the interview and you'll think that was really hard, and I'm pretty sure I got most of it wrong, and you know, I'm sure that was a complete disaster. And people are very often really surprised when we make them an offer because they think, my interview was terrible. But the thing is that if we just said to everybody, what's 2 + 2, and they said 4, and we said, right, thanks, you know, we'd have no means of discriminating between them. So we've got to push people. And if you do well on something, we'll push you harder and we'll ask you a harder question. If you do well on that, we'll push you harder and we'll ask you a harder question, until eventually everybody gets to the point where they're thinking, this is really making my brain hurt. This is really hard. But that's how we see how your brain does it. And we see how far we can take your brain with that process and see how you reason through the things that we give you and the questions that we ask you. So yeah, just respond to them. Just, you know, see it as a kind of giant puzzle that you're trying to solve with us, and we'll do it in a very kind of friendly and collaborative way. We won't put you on the spot or make you feel uncomfortable. You know, my colleague Ariel and I in college quite often make people laugh quite a lot during the interview, because we just want people to relax and feel like themselves, because that's how they're going to perform their best. You know, we're going to get the best out of their brain that way. So we'll do it in a really friendly way with you. And if we think you've gone wrong, we'll say, you sure? Do you want to have a think about that again? And then you can go, no, I'm not sure. I think that was wrong. I'm going to have another go now. And that's absolutely fine. That's what we expect you to do. We expect you to have a go with something, see if it works, come back if it doesn't, you know, try the different things out. That's exactly the kind of thought process that we're going to take you through. And we can see from that, you know, can you be reasonable? Can you be logical? Can you make sensible distinctions? Can you spot, you know, key things and do intelligent things with them? It's that kind of process. So if you just use your common sense and see it as like a kind of puzzle which you try and solve with us and think about as best you can and as intelligently as you can, and explain to us what your thought process is, it's absolutely fine to say, look, I want to say yes, but here's the reasons why I'm pausing, because I'm not quite sure about saying yes. And here's why I don't want to say no, because it's this. And we can see your thought process then. And that's really what we want to do. So our whole approach to the interview will be to get you to be, we know you're going to be stressed. We know it's a nervous thing to do, but we want you to relax as much as possible. And we'll do our best to try and put you as much at ease as possible. And then we'll take you through these reasoning things. They will be difficult. You will think, goodness me, I don't think I did very well at that. But you will actually have done well, you know, in comparison to a lot of other people. And you'd be surprised, quite a lot of people actually, when I sort of talk to my freshers about their interview process when they first arrive, quite often they say, kind of enjoyed it a little bit, actually. I mean, it was terrifying, but I kind of also did a little bit enjoy it. And, you know, if you're the sort of person who likes solving puzzles and you like that kind of logical thinking, then you will like that. And that is what the interviews have a lot of in them. So yeah, they are very relaxed. And, you know, we're not bothered about things like what people wear, or, you know, most of the doorknobs in Oxford don't work because they're all in really old buildings, and there's always all sorts of difficulty getting people into and out of the rooms. And it all really, really doesn't matter, because all we're interested in is just having a chat to you once you've made it into the room, seeing how your brain works, and then seeing what you can do with the stuff when we try and work with you. That's all we're really interested in. So yes, don't stress about finding the room, finding the door, getting in, what you wear, where you sit, any of that stuff. Don't let it bother you. Just, you know, think about the stuff we ask you with your brain as best you can and reason through it with us. And that's the best advice I can give, really.
Awesome. Thank you, Rebecca. Sorry, hopefully no one noticed, but I did go AWOL for a while there. There was a question about saying there wasn't much resources for the LNAT. But what I would advise you to do is have a look on the Pearson LNAT website, and there is actually a lot of resources on there. It goes through the whole exam as on there as well. So it's a really good one to look at. If you're looking for like example essays, you can get like Big Questions. Oxford Big Questions is a really good website to go to, and it just throws out random questions to you and you can mix it up. And then my advice to you is kind of, I know if you're traveling from A to B with your family in a car, you're stuck for things to say, throw out a big question to your family and see what happens. And it will help you, you know, bouncing back ideas off each other, which would be good for your interview as well. Just one last thing before we wrap up is just to confirm to everyone that the interviews this year will be all online again, just the way that the university is doing it this year to make sure everyone stays safe. So actually, it doesn't matter what you wear on your interview, as long as the top half is fine, you're all good. But I'd like to take this moment to thank everyone for coming. Rebecca, thank you so much for your first virtual interview or website thing with us. Sahil and Imogen, thanks so much for joining us, ambassadors. You did an awesome job as well. If anyone has any questions, you can always email me at undergraduate.inquiries@law.ox.ac.uk. and I'm happily answer them, especially at this time of year. Lots of people have questions about the LNAT, so just feel free to send me an email and I will respond as soon as possible. And the main thing to remember is the LNAT this year, the deadline is the 15th of October. The UCAS deadline is the same day, the 15th of October at 6 p.m. So anything after 6 p.m. will not be accepted. So thank you guys. Thank you so much for coming on today and helping out. It's been a real treat. Okay.